Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this morning's study. We're going to continue here in 2 Kings. We were reading in chapter 8. We're going to go through this again, and then we'll see how far we get today. This week, we're going to be doing a bit more chronology. At least I think so. So I've been preparing some material for that. But before we do, let's have a word of prayer. Dear gracious Heavenly Father, thank you for this morning and for each person here and those that watch these videos. We ask for your Spirit to guide us, to instruct us, and to fill us, that we may reflect your character. And we are thankful, Lord, for the light that shines upon our path. We ask for strength that we can walk that path, that we can trust in you even when we can't see exactly where we're going, but that we can trust the light that is at our feet. So be with us now through thy Spirit, we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, well, I hope everybody had a good day yesterday, and I don't know how many people spent time thinking about these verses that we've been looking at. Now, just as a quick summary, we have these stories of Elisha, and we have this double portion that is upon Elisha. Now, Elisha then represents the second angel's message, the double portion of the Spirit that was upon Elijah. Now, that inheritance is symbolic in the sense that we know the double portion often was just the firstborn receiving an inheritance from the father that was double of what the other sons would receive, right? So that was the idea of the inheritance, how it was divided amongst the family. Now, with that blessing of the double portion also is attached the kingship and the priesthood. Now here in this case, it's used symbolically, but it's also represented in the types of miracles that Elisha performs. And these also typify to some degree what happens with Christ. We have Elisha raising a child from the dead. Jesus raises the child from the dead. He has the blessing, I guess, on the oil and the flour, right? He multiplies food. Jesus does that in the feeding of the 5,000 and the 4,000. And some people then say that this is artificial in the life of Christ. It's meant to imitate Elisha, and it's some kind of trope. But we understand that this is real, right? This is real history, not just the story of Christ, but also in the story of Elisha. And we have John the Baptist who precedes Christ. So we see a parallel between Elijah and John the Baptist and between Elisha and Christ. Now, those parallels, they were used within this movement by Parminder in claiming that he was Elisha, right? He was Joshua, he was Christ, right? So, and we would not, and we would look at Miller and Samuel Snow, and we wouldn't argue that some person is Samuel Snow. And even in a sense, even though Jeff is typified by Miller, you know, both Miller and Jeff are not prophets in the same way that you would have Elijah being a prophet or John the Baptist. They serve a role symbolically, but we don't look at them having the same. They have the same role, but you know, Miller is making mistakes that we wouldn't see Elijah making. I don't know if that's a fair way to describe Miller, but he's not an infallible prophet, and neither was Jeff. But they still serve that role. But more importantly, we can see that the Millerite movement and also FFA have more of a parallel. That is not the people themselves, but the movements themselves. And so we don't look for somebody to be, you know, Samuel Snow in our history. We just recognize that we move from that the leadership changes to Christ. So we look at Christ as being our leader under the second angel's message. And that transition from Elijah to Elisha. We're gonna look at that more. We're gonna go back over this stuff. I don't want to leave some of this stuff, all these loose threads hanging, but we're trying to get a bigger picture right now. But we know that the journey that happens, we've talked about, are those waymarks where he goes from Gilgal to Bethel, to Jericho, then he crosses the Jordan and comes back, right? This time with the cloak of Elijah, but as Elisha went with Elijah, right? And we never mark that specifically, right? But we know that that symbolizes our history. And then we have these stories of Elisha that we believe that either they are, each of the stories is a waymark in our line, or maybe in some ways they overlap, but we haven't drawn them on the line yet. But we will, the Lord willing, we have enough time, we will go back over these things. But right now we're trying to, just like we did with the book of Judges, as we go through this story of First Kings and Second Kings, that is over the chronology of the kings of Judah and Israel, however long this takes us, we should have a much better grasp, not just of the chronology, which we know is correct because we have, at least in its broadest details, it is. Maybe there are details that we will correct as we go through this, but we know that that overall structure is correct. But more importantly, we start to understand the significance of these stories, which in my original study of the chronology, I didn't address. The symbolic aspects of these stories, it was just working out the chronology. So now we're working through these stories, which is really helpful for me, right? To now put some of these dates within this narrative and to understand their relation, not just historically, which is really, really nice, but also to Millerite history, to Adventist history, to our history. So anyway, that's the summary. Hopefully that's helpful. Now, we had this story where the Shunamites' land is restored. And what we had there was this 7 years. Now, we haven't figured out when those 7 years were, where we would place them within the chronology. But it seems that those 7 years are ending, in my view, that this must be ending near the end of the reign of Jehoram, right? Is it Jehoram that we're dealing with here? Yeah, because we're going to have, or Joram of Israel, and then we're going to end up with Jehu, right? Jehu's going to be come, right? So he's going to anoint Jehu, and we started reading that story. So Jehu's going to end up becoming, and then it's going to mention Jehoram, which is sometimes called Joram, the king of Judah, right? So it's going to say in the 5th year of Joram, the son of Ahab, king of Israel, Jehoshaphat, then being king of Judah, Jehoram, the son of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, began to reign, right? So we have this in the 5th year. And then we're going to have in the 12th year of Jehoram, the son of Ahab, king of Israel, did Ahaziah, the son of Jehoram, king of Judah, begin to reign. And we have, so this is in the 12th year, in chapter 9, we're going to have a little puzzle that, we're going to sort out. And I think it's in 35, so verse 29 to 30. Oh, yeah. 2 Kings 9:29. And in the 11th year of Joram, the son of Ahab, began Ahaziah to reign over Judah. So here it's going to say it's in the 11th year. And so we will look at this. We'll try to figure out why one place, the next chapter, it says the 11th year, where in the previous chapter it says the 12th year. And, surely a person is not going to make those types of obvious errors. That is, it's not an error. It's something that we need to be corrected by. And again, I repeat this all the time, but the way that we approach the scriptures is that we are to be corrected, not the scriptures to be corrected. So this has been illustrated in lots of different ways and things that we have found as we've studied through the Bible.
I have a couple of questions, Theodore.
Okay, good, Angela.
Shunam or Shunammite, does that mean 2 resting places?
Yeah, so go back here. Where does it mention the name Shunem? Shunem. What's the Hebrew number?
I don't have my
Okay.
e-sword anymore.
Okay. Yeah, I'll just go back to the story of the Shunammite. This is going to be, okay, so it's going to be here. Okay, so we got the Shunem. 7766 is the number.
Well, that's an interesting number for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, we get an interesting number there. A double resting place.
Double rest. There we go.
Okay. So that, and I mean, we're going to come back to this and we'll see some of the things about it. Now, I just want to look at the Hebrew itself. So we got Shunem. Well, it's based on the word. So that, just the way that it's spelled here, I just want to see how they spell it in. Yeah, so it's just basically Shunem. That's the plural of the dual, plural, right? That's why double. Shuni means to rest, to be quiet. So shunim is just to a double of resting.
So could be restoring her land be like restoring the importance of Sabbath keeping, resting in Jesus?
Yeah, well, I don't know if I would connect this word particularly with that type of rest, because there's, you know what I'm saying, but I would focus more upon the doubling part of it.
Okay, second angel.
But yeah, I'd have to think about that a little bit. I mean, I'd have to look at sort of more the story and the context of it.
And also the 11th and the 12th year, I was thinking, well, maybe that's to remind us to disregard the 0 year, like the two methods of counting, right?
Yeah, but well, I think there's something else that's there that we need to look at. That we're going to have to try to work it out. But it is, to me, it's obviously not a typo.
No,
That
of course not.
that there is something meant there when they say that, and that's what we have to figure out, why they give two different numbers for it.
Could it have been mid-year or close to
Well,
the
no,
mid-year?
it's just something. It's something within the story itself that we need to pay attention to.
Okay.
So one of the things that, when I deal with chronology, I've had to learn how to count. That is, there's different ways they count things, and they count things differently because of the perspective that they're looking at. Now, we do that as well. We just don't think much about it because we're used to how we count things, right? So different types of things we count differently. We generally never say, in 2 days when we mean tomorrow, right? Where in Hebrew they can, or in 3 days, when we mean 2 days from now, right? So there are some things that we don't do that the Jews do. And so those are the things that catch us off guard. But, we'll often say something was, 3 years ago, when it's actually much shorter than 3 years ago, just because we'll just be counting the year. So, if something happened in, like, the year right now, it's 2026, and something happened in 2024 at the end of the year, and we're at the beginning of the year, we still might say 2 years, even though it might be a year and 2 months, right? So those types of things, or what am I saying? So 2 years. Yeah, so that would be, we'd say 3 years, and it might be 2 years and 2 months. Yeah. So we do those types of things because we can think of years in blocks in that way. Or if we're referring to as the school year, and again, the school year differs from our annual year, right? We have a school year that begins in September. So somebody in university might say, I went to university for 4 years. I've been in university for 4 years. They started in September, and now it's, maybe it's not even the next year. They're just, I've been going to university for 4 years, and they're like, it's really like 3 years and 3 months. So they're not using the calendar year, right? They're using the school year. or we may talk about different seasons or things like that. So we have different ways of counting. And the thing that the Jews have been doing here is they're counting within the reign of a king. So when you have a king of Judah, he begins to reign, they're going to match it off with what year of the reign of the king in Israel that king began to reign. Right? Now, there's also different things about a king beginning to reign, that is his accession year, and also when he actually comes to the throne. And that's not always really clear what they mean. So the big assumption that everyone makes is that when it says a king reigns a certain number of years, that means it's in that year of his reign, whether it's a spring to spring, fall to fall year, that he dies and the next king becomes king. But I've shown that's a false assumption. That for the kings of Judah specifically, they're fixing that for us in the length of the reign of a king, so that we don't have to, account for spring to spring or fall to fall in that sense. We just total those all together. We can tally them up, and we can have the reigns of the kings of Judah. Kings of Israel are a little bit different because they have changes in dynasty. And then the question is, well, what year are we talking about from what perspective when we're talking about the reign of a king? So these things we're going to deal with, and hopefully by the time we get through this, we'll all have a working knowledge that we can recreate this chronology on our own. And I've been thinking, quite a bit about it because, writing that book and discussions that I had with Florin Lau, whatever his last name is, from Romania, who's a professor in Romania, the university there, and the type of thinking that I call it sort of lazy and sloppy kind of thinking about chronology. People just don't want to do the work, and they will just accept things that don't make any sense. So to being able to understand the importance of this chronology as far as our own understanding, but also how we can communicate to others, that's the thing that I've always struggled with. How do I help other people understand something that is not something you can see on the surface, and why it's important for Bible study? And a good example of this would be when people are challenging 677 BC for Manasseh's captivity, and they use Thiel's chronology and don't realize what they're doing when they do that. They don't realize that they're rejecting the Bible. They just say, oh, that's not when Manasseh was taken captive, because that would be like the 10th year of his reign. That's way too early, and different arguments like that. So we can't afford to be sloppy about it. But it is a difficult area, right? So that's what I'm struggling with. Like, first we have to understand it, but then we have to figure out how to communicate this to people so that they can see the relevance of what we're doing. But anyway, so when we get back to chapter 8, so we have the Shunammite, she comes up again, right? And so that to me is really quite important. But we're not doing that right now. We're not drawing that on a line. But somehow in this story of Elisha, her having her land restored is some symbol that we would need to understand in how we put this whole structure together. We just don't know what it is yet. We're just noting the symbols.
Well, I'm thinking it could be reminding us about what Ellen White said, quoting Isaiah 11:11. The Lord is turning his hand a second time to regather his people.
Yeah, well, I think it has something symbolized.
Double resting place. I mean, yeah, it's a restoration.
Yeah. That's the way that I look at it. Is something to do with our history repeating or something. But you understand there's a lot of details we're going to have to work out when we put that on a line and where we decide it fits. And it should be something like all the other things that we've discovered, where they just fall into place. So usually we have some kind of key that unlocks that. And then, yeah, we examine all the pieces of the puzzle, mull over them, and then all of a sudden we see how they all fit together. And so I think that's going to happen with this story of Elisha and the Shunammite and all these things we're reading over the last little while. So then, so we have this where Ben-Hadad is sick, right? So, and he's told that the man of God, that is Elisha, is there. And the king said to Hazael, take a present in thine hand and go meet the man of God and inquire of the Lord by him, saying, shall I recover of this disease? So we read the story through here where Hazael goes to meet him, took the present with him, even of every good thing of Damascus, 40 camels and a burden, and came and stood before him and said, thy son Ben-Hadad, king of Syria, hath sent me to thee, saying, shall I recover of this disease? And Elisha said unto him, go and say unto him, thou mayest certainly recover. Howbeit, the Lord has showed me that he shall surely die. Right? And she's going to stare at him until he's like embarrassed. And then the man of God begins crying. So Elisha begins crying, and Hazael's like, why are you crying? And then he says, because I know the evil that thou wilt do unto the children of Israel. And he's saying, like, how could I do this? Is this thy servant a dog that he should do this great thing? And Elisha answered, the Lord hath showed me that thou shalt be king over Syria. Right. So he departed from Elisha, came to his master, says, yeah, you're going to recover. But on the next day, he's going to take this thick cloth, dip it in water, spread it on his face so that he died. So he's going to suffocate him. And then he's going to become the king of Syria in Damascus. So a very interesting story. Now, again, what that's going to mean as far as where we place that, we know when we're dealing with Syria and Damascus, we have some ties symbolically to the 2520. Obviously, this is prior to the commencement of the 2520, but these different symbols in these stories of the kings of Judah and Israel that continue through this period are all relevant in how they relate to what happens with the civil war, where Syria is going to be involved. So if we think about it here, we had, the dividing of the kingdom back in 977 BC, and we've gone through these kings so far. And we're going to come to the last king of Israel. And in dealing with the last king of Israel, that's going to be dealing with the fall of Samaria, right, with Hoshea. But that's prophesied in Isaiah 7, at least in part. I mean, mostly it's addressing Judah, right, because the prophecy is to the king of Judah, to the house of David, not to the king of Israel. But Syria is involved there, and we have this league between Syria and Israel that happens at that time. So all of these details need to be kept in mind. And this is the one thing I think that I've learned, and I'm sure you guys have learned much the same thing, is the importance of the details within a story in Scripture. That in a superficial reading, we just, we could even ask the question, why is that there? It's just something to keep the story going, or is it some significant detail? And we find that this isn't just an account of the kings of Judah and Israel, of everything that happened, that what is revealed in Scripture, what is given in these stories, are purposeful as types, right? They're in samples, as Paul says. So the fact that we have these as types means we need to pay attention to the details in these stories. But yeah, the average person just thinks, oh, it's just a story. Maybe there's some, devotional lesson we can learn from reading these stories. But we have details like numbers and dates and all kinds of names and things that are symbols, and most people just pay no attention to those at all. Okay, so then we have in the 5th year of Joram, the son of Ahab, king of Israel, that Jehoshaphat, being king of Judah, Jehoram, the son of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, began to reign. So we now have Joram and Jehoram reigning at the same time. And yeah, this is one of those difficult things. Now, Jehoram's reign happening at the time of Joram is because he begins to co-reign with Jehoshaphat in the 5th year of Joram. So we'll just use Joram for Israel and Jehoram for Judah. But his reign is then going to end with Ahaziah being made king in the 11th year or the 12th year of Joram, right? So we can easily see that span of time. We have this ladder that connects us. But when Ahaziah becomes king, he's just going to be king for a year, right? He's not going to be king very long. And so the point in which he becomes king, that detail, trying to figure that out, and why the 11th and the 12th year are both mentioned, I think is interesting. I think we'll learn something from that about how to count. So, but anyway, here we're going to have first Jehoram, the son of Jehoshaphat. He's going to be 32 years when he begins to reign. He reigns 8 years in Jerusalem. And he walked in the way of the kings of Israel, as did the house of Ahab. For the daughter of Ahab was his wife, and he did evil in the sight of the Lord. So we have this this intermarriage between the family of the house of Ahab and the house of David, right? And this is one of those things that confused me, and I think it's interesting in lots of different ways. It's interesting in the point of dealing with the biblical chronology, but understanding the relationship between Judah and Israel. And so one of the things Dwight's brought out a bit is that there's Judah and Israel and these relationship between the two. Now, and we could look at this and just say, does this happen with Protestants and Adventism, Judah being Adventism and Northern Israel being Protestantism? And of course, we know that there is this league made, right? A type of marriage that occurs in between the kings of Judah and Israel is the type of the relationship between Protestants and the evangelicals and the Adventists in the 1950s, at least, right? We'd have to say there's that parallel. How that would apply then further to our history later on, we haven't sorted all of this out, but we can.
And I would say also the corruption between the merging church and state.
Yeah, but we also have 9/11 with spiritual formation, which was our church agreeing to have to teach spiritual formation to our ministers in order for our ministers to be accredited in evangelical and Protestant colleges, right? So that our ministerial can. It still never made any sense to me, like what Adventists have to do with Protestants. I mean, they're not going to accept us as ministers in their churches. Why do we need our institutions to be accredited by them? And it's accreditation for pastors specifically, right? Like, if you get a degree in an Adventist university, is a Baptist church going to hire you to be a pastor? Would you even want to be a Baptist pastor? Like, you understand it to me is just like one of the silliest things that the church could do. It makes no sense. But it is a sign of a type of league. Whether that is actually something that's symbolized there or not, I don't know. But yeah, obviously when we get to the Sunday law, we're going to see more what this means, I think. So, and then he reigns 8 years in Jerusalem, right? So when we looked at the chronology that we had of Joram from the 5th year to the 12th year, well, that looks like 7 years, right? 5 to 12 is 7 years. But it's going to say that he reigned for 8 years. Now, if you go from 5 to 11, that even looks like 6 years. So there's something there that we have to sort out. Why is that apparent discrepancy there? So, I mean, part of it would be, where does he begin to reign? Now, we know that one thing that we do know is that his 8 years is not from the time when Jehoshaphat dies, because that would be, in the 7th year. And, that would be, so the 8 years can't apply there at all. So it has to go back to when he begins his co-reign. But it's meant to be a number that we can then, like there's a purpose in the number, right? They're going to say 8 rather than 6, or 8 rather than 7, so that we get the correct chronology in the end. So we need to see the 2 years difference just in the plain math. So the 8 years tells us that there's 2 years difference. But anyway, we will look at that in more detail. Okay. So he does all this evil, right? So then we're going to have Edom revolt under the hand of Judah and made a king over themselves. So Joram, that's the king of Israel, went over to Zaire and all the chariots with him, and he rose by night and smote the Edomites which compassed him about, and the captains of the chariots, and the people fled into their tents. Yet Edom revolted from under the hand of Judah unto this day. Then Libnah revolted at the same time. And the rest of the acts of Joram and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Judah? And Joram slept with his fathers and was buried with his fathers in the city of David. And Ahaziah, his son, reigned in his stead. So this must be, am I getting mixed up here? Is this, we got Jehoram reigns in Judah. You see why I get confused. And then we're going to have Ahaziah, his son, but it says that he's the son of Joram, which I was using as the king of Israel. So they must be using the name Joram here for the king of Judah. So they call him Jehoram and Joram in the same chapter, right? Because if Joram slept with his fathers and he's buried in the city of David, that's Jehoram. Okay. And then Ahaziah, so he's the king of Judah. And in the 12th year of Joram, the son of Ahab, king of Israel, did Ahaziah, the son of Jehoram, king of Judah, begin to reign, right? So we got Ahaziah, he's the son of Jehoram, king of Judah. So we had Jehoram, he began to reign when he was 32 years old, and he reigned, so he'd be like 40, I guess, when he dies, right? Okay. And so just put a note there that Shunem is in Issachar, the tribe noted for its skills in chronology. Okay. So 22 years old was Ahaziah when he began to reign. So his dad must have had him when he was like 18. And he reigned 1 year in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Athaliah, the daughter of Omri, king of Israel. So Ahaziah is actually a descendant of the tribes of Israel. So because Jehoram had married this daughter of Omri named Athaliah, so that's the queen, right? She's the queen. Okay. And I'm getting this right? So Ahaziah then is, her son, but she is of the house of Omri, right? And he walked in the way of the house of Ahab. So sometimes they call it Omri, sometimes they call it Ahab. And did evil in the sight of the Lord, as did the house of Ahab, for he was the son-in-law of the house of Ahab. And he went with Joram, the son of Ahab, the other Joram, to war against Hazael, king of Syria, in Ramoth Gilead, and the Syrians wounded Joram. And King Joram went back to be healed in Jezreel of the wounds which the Syrians had given him in Ramah. and when he fought against Hazael, king of Syria, and Ahaziah, the son of Jehoram, king of Judah, so now we call him Jehoram again, went down to see Joram, the son of Ahab, in Jezreel because he was sick. Boy. Okay. And Elisha the prophet called one of the children of the prophets and said unto him, Gird up thy loins, and take this box of oil in thine hand, and go to Ramoth Gilead. And when thou comest thither, look out there Jehu the son of Jehoshaphat, the son of Nimshi, and go in and make him arise up from among his brethren, and carry him to an inner chamber. And take the box of oil and pour it on his head, and say, Thus saith the Lord, I have anointed thee king over Israel. Then open the door and flee and tarry not. So again, we have this really interesting detail. We have Jehu, who is going to now end the dynasty of Omri and Ahab, right? And he's going to be the son of Jehoshaphat. That is, he is a brother to Ahaziah, right? Is that how we understand this in some way, right? Because he's the son of Jehoshaphat, so he's a brother to Ahaziah, who only gets to be king for a year. And so now we move back to the kingdom of Israel, and we're going to have this family connection here. So the king of Israel is going to be a descendant of the house of David. He's a descendant of Jehoshaphat. Any comment on this? Is it clear to everyone what's happened here?
It says in 2 Kings 8:25 that Ahaziah is the son of Jehoram.
Okay, the son. Okay, so that means he's his uncle then? Is that what we're having here? Or when we deal with the son?
I'm getting tangled up too, but I'm.
Anyway. Well, the question is, are we dealing with the son, like the direct son? So when it says he's the son of Jehoshaphat, now Jehoshaphat, he marries Athaliah, right? Is he the one that marries Athaliah?
I don't.
Right.
Did he? That was a horrible mistake if he did.
Well, he's okay. Let's go back. So, yeah, I know I get completely turned around with this.
Yeah, I'm getting that way too.
Yeah, so that's why I want. So in the 5th year of Joram, the son of Ahab, Jehoshaphat being king of Judah, Joram the son of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, began to reign. Right, he's going to be 32. So we have Jehoshaphat, now the question is who married the daughter of. So you're saying, let me see. So his mother's name was Athaliah. So this is going to be Ahaziah. His mother's name was Athaliah, the daughter of Omri, which is the granddaughter.
Right.
So his mother's name. So that usually would refer, well, it can refer to a grandmother as well. So the question is who married Athaliah? That, I guess, is the question we have to ask. So Athaliah, the daughter of Ahab and Jezebel, and the wife of King Jehoram of Judah. Okay, so not Jehoshaphat, but Jehoram, killer of all the members of the royal family of Judah, with the exception of one baby named Joash, who was hidden by high priest Jehoiada, which we haven't got to yet, until 6 years had passed, and Jehoiada led the revolution to put him on the throne, overthrowing Athaliah and putting her to death. So we're gonna read all of that. So that means she married Jehoram, not Jehoshaphat. So she marries Jehoram, and so then Ahaziah is the son of Jehoram, and so is Jehu, right? So they would be brothers. Okay, so let me see if I can get some of this. Okay, so son and daughter were used by the Jews of any descendants. The whole race were the children of Israel. Athaliah was the granddaughter of Omri. Her being called the daughter of Omri implies that an idea of special greatness was regarded as attaching to him, so that his name prevailed over that of Ahab. Indications of his ideal greatness are found in the Assyrian inscriptions, where the early name for samurai is Beth Omri, that is the house of Omri, and where Jehu has the title of the son of Omri, right? So Jehu is not really directly, he's of the House of Omri, but he's really from the House of Judah, but through his mother he's from the House of Omri, even though he's creates a new dynasty. You see what I'm saying? It helps explain some things that I didn't understand before, but it is rather confusing. Numbers are way easier for me than names and trying to sort them out. So if this is correct, that we have this marriage of Jehoram of Judah to this granddaughter of Ahab, right? Or granddaughter of Omri, however we want to look at it, named Athaliah, then since we're going to have Jehu, the son of Jehoshaphat, now, is he then the uncle? Can he be the son of Jehoshaphat in the sense that he's just the same way that Athaliah is the daughter of Omri, right? That's what I'm trying to ask here. So is this mean he's actually directly the son that is the uncle of, so he wouldn't be then descended from Omri, right, in that case. Now, it says, talks about Nimshi, so this Jehoshaphat's the son of Nimshi, right, the grandfather of Jehu. So that's a man that's not referring to his mother. It doesn't particularly say who his mother is. So the father, so probably, okay, the father of, let me see this here, grandfather of Jehu. Okay, so Jehu, the son of Jehoshaphat. So that means he would be the son then. So that he would be the uncle then of Ahaziah, if that's the case. But yeah, they don't always specify these things as nicely as I would like. Now we have that number for Nimshi too, 5250. So that's the 525, which matches up with the 2520. Let's see what other people say about this. It doesn't say too much here.
What I really find interesting too is that Jehoshaphat was such a reformer. He sent Levites throughout the land of Judah and also judges. So this guy was a revolutionary. I mean, it's amazing. And then I said, how could he fail so badly in allying with Ahab?
Yeah. And then, so then the marriage is his son, Jehoram, is going to marry the granddaughter of Omri, right? That's her, or of, so he's going to marry into, so that would be, so is it that Jehoshaphat makes this league by having his son marry one of the tribe of Israel?
Well, that's what it sounds like, because I think it's in 2 Kings 8. It says, in 27, he walked in the way of the house of Ahab and did evil in the sight of the Lord. And this is talking about Ahaziah, for he was the son-in-law of the house of Ahab.
Okay, that's which verse again?
That's 8:27, talking about Ahaziah.
Yeah. So he's the son-in-law. So that is relative by marriage.
I don't know the exact where exactly it is in the spirit of prophecy, but the spirit of prophecy says that Jehoshaphat went to league with Ahab. He done that because he wanted to bring Israel back to Judah. So I think it's in the spirit of prophecy somewhere, because I've read it once before. He used that to try to get back together.
Yeah, you never win people by compromise. This is the lesson that we need to learn here.
Yeah, it's the 1950s. Adventism and the evangelicals, right? The courting of the event, because that was the whole thing, is we're going to win over the Protestants by studying them in their schools, showing them that we're educated. We're not just a bunch of ignorant farmers, who made a failed time prediction, right?
Yeah.
Because of how Millerites and Adventists were mocked, for their basically being uneducated, not scholarly enough. So,
Oh, that's
so there
so
was,
ludicrous.
yeah. So you have this push in Adventism to get recognition. People always want recognition, as if somehow if a man recognizes you, it means something. And the church always wanted me to get, I'd talk to some pastor or something at camp meeting, and they'd be very impressed with my knowledge. They say, you really need to go to our schools, you know, then people will listen to you. And
Oh, in other
I
words,
never,
then we with our PhDs and our MDivs will listen to you
yeah,
and will stamp you with our
and
approval. Like
and
that.
I
Weak
never
was that?
fell, yeah, I never fell for that foolishness. I
Yeah.
understood exactly what it meant. That's why I went to Silver Hills instead, because there's a lady in the church. She would have paid for me to go to CUC and get my, become a minister, right? She had the money to do it, and you know, she really, was impressed with me and wanted me to get this education. But I chose Silver Hills instead.
Thank God.
Thank God. No kidding.
Don't forget your spiritual formation, or as they call it in the other Protestant churches, transformation. I refused to take the course. They still let me in. Thank the Lord.
Yeah, well, I needed the education, the practical education of Silver Hills. That was absolutely essential because I was pretty much a useless individual at that time in my life, you know. So I actually learned to be practical, which was really, really important, and it taught me a lot of humility. Not that I'm that humble, but you know what I mean. I was humbled there at Silver Hills because nobody cared what I had to say about anything. you know
Mm,
where back in the upper room studies everybody looked to me for wisdom and knowledge, even though I was
the
just
guru.
an ignorant new Adventist. So and you could easily get puffed up by that kind of stuff. People do.
Yeah.
So the
Paul wrote
praise of
about
man
that.
can go to your head. So I needed that experience in Silver Hills from that perspective. But I also saw, what happened to my dad. I saw, what happened to the United Church of Canada. I saw Adventism going in the same direction. So God, in His providence, put me in the places I need to be, to learn the lessons that I needed to learn, which we all need to learn. These are not easy lessons. Uh, the trials we have, the failures we have, all of these things. Either we learn by them, learn from them, or we ignore those lessons and we go off into darkness. So, and I'm still trying to learn many of these lessons as well. And so, but anyway, so I'm just reading here in the Spirit of Prophecy. This is from Prophets and Kings. So Athaliah is mentioned a few times. That's the word I looked up. I just looked up Athaliah. So let's look at what she says here, because this should help us a bit. Because I really want to get this sorted out in my head. So for many years, Jehoshaphat lived in peace, unmolested by surrounding nations. The fear of the Lord fell upon the kingdoms of the lands that were round about Judah. From Philistia, he received tribute money and presents. From Arabia, large flocks of sheep and goats. Jehoshaphat waxed great exceedingly, and he built in Judah castles and cities of stores. Men of war, mighty men of valor, waited on the king beside those whom the king put in fenced cities throughout all Judah. Blessed abundantly with riches and honor, he was enabled to wield a mighty influence for truth and righteousness. Some years after coming to the throne, Jehoshaphat, now in the height of his prosperity, consented to the marriage of his son Jehoram to Athaliah, daughter of Ahab and Jezebel. By this union there was formed between the kingdoms of Judah and Israel an alliance which was not in the order of God, and which in a time of crisis brought disaster to the king and to many of his subjects. Right? So this helps clarify it, and it's what we sort of figured it out. But Ellen White says the same thing. On one occasion, Jehoshaphat visited the king of Israel at Samaria. Special honor was shown the royal guest from Jerusalem, and before the close of his visit, he was persuaded to unite with the king of Israel in the war against the Syrians, which we've read about. Ahab hoped that by joining his forces with those of Judah, he might regain Ramoth, one of the old cities of refuge, which he contended rightfully belonged to the Israelites. Although Jehoshaphat, in a moment of weakness, had rashly promised to join the king of Israel in his war against the Syrians, yet his better judgment led him to seek to learn the will of God concerning the undertaking. Inquire, I pray thee, at the word of the Lord today. So we went through that story, but we can see that this first step is this alliance of allowing his son to marry the daughter of Ahab, right? Just looking at other places. Okay, Jehoram, the son of Ahab, was still reigning in the kingdom of Israel when his nephew, Ahaziah, came to the throne of Judah. Okay, so Joram's the son of Ahab. He's reigning. So we can see that Ahaziah is the nephew, right? So we understand that his mother is Athaliah. Okay. Right. Ahaziah ruled only 1 year, and during this time, influenced by his mother Athaliah, his counselor to do wickedly, he walked in the way of the house of Ahab and did evil in the sight of the Lord. Now, we haven't looked at the Second Chronicles accounts of this. We will as well. Jezebel, his grandmother, was still living, and he allied himself boldly with Jehoram of Israel, his uncle. Okay, so he's connected to Joram of Israel. That's his uncle. Okay, Ahaziah, his son, soon met a tragic end. The surviving members of the house of Ahab were indeed his counselors after the death of his father to his destruction. While Ahaziah was visiting his uncle at Jezreel, the prophet Elisha was divinely directed to send one of the sons of the prophets of Ramoth Gilead to anoint Jehu, king of Israel. So that's right where we're at. Now here I'm interested to see what differences are in Second Chronicles on this story, if some of these things are clarified a bit. Joram had been wounded in battle, Jehoram, king of Judah, and had returned to Jezreel, leaving Jehu, or no, that's Jehoram, king of Israel. Oh, man. Leaving Jehu in charge of the royal armies. In anointing Jehu, the messenger of Elisha declared, I have anointed thee king over the people of the Lord, even over Israel. And then he solemnly charged Jehu with a special commission from heaven. Thou shalt smite the house of Ahab thy master. And the Lord declared through his messenger, that I may avenge the blood of my servants the prophets, and the blood of all the servants of the Lord at the hand of Jezebel, for the whole house of Ahab shall perish. Okay, so again, Jehu is, so it doesn't say here specifically, but Jehu is the son of Jotham, right? Is that what we decided?
The son of Jehoshaphat.
Jehoshaphat. Yeah, that's what I meant to say. I knew I was saying the wrong name. Jehoshaphat. It's just a J name. Okay, Jehoshaphat, right? So he's the son of Jehoshaphat, so that he would then be, so he's the uncle of, how is he related to the king? How is he related to Joram? So Joram is oh man.
Looks like he's also the nephew of Joram.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to figure out, how he's related to Joram. So now, because he's related, and he's working for Joram, right? Right. So he's going to be. Let's go back here and read. I'm going to get this straight into my head. Don't worry. I know you guys probably are doing better at this than me. Okay, so we got Jehu, the son of Jehoshaphat. So he would be the brother of Jehoram, king of Judah, and Jehoram is going to marry into the house of Ahab, right, through Athaliah. So they would just be a brother-in-law. They're not, but if Jehu's the son of Jehoshaphat, he would be the brother of Jehoram, right? So if he's the brother, and then his brother gets married to the house of Omri, right, then he's just a brother-in-law, right? He's not directly related, but he's going to become the king of Israel through just a marriage relation. So it becomes a new dynasty. So he's of the house of David. He's not of the house of Omri. Correct? Am I getting this correct now? Yeah, just to have the son of Jehoshaphat. So that is somebody who would be of the line of David to become the king in Israel. That's kind of interesting, I think, that this new dynasty is a branch off of the king, the house of David. But I think I got that right now. Okay, so he's going to be anointed. So a box of oil is going to be poured on his head. And thus saith the Lord, I have anointed thee king over Israel. Then open the door, flee, and tarry not. So that's going to be the direction given to this young man. So he's going to go to Ramoth Gilead. When he came, behold, the captains of the host were sitting, and he said, I have an errand to thee, O captain. And Jehu said, unto which of all of us? And he said, to thee, O captain. And he arose and went into the house. He poured the oil on his head and said unto him, thus saith the Lord God of Israel, I have anointed thee king over the people of the Lord, even over Israel. And thou shalt smite the house of Ahab thy master, that I may avenge the blood of my servants the prophets, and the blood of all the servants of the Lord at the hand of Jezebel. For the whole house of Ahab shall perish, and I will cut off from Ahab him that pisseth against the wall, and him that is shut up and left in Israel. And I will make the house of Ahab like the house of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, and like the house of Baasha the son of Ahijah. So those are the two other dynasties that had occurred already. So we had Jeroboam's dynasty and Baasha ends that dynasty. Right. So, and the dog shall eat Jezebel in the portion of Jezreel, and there shall be none to bury her. And he opened the door and fled. And Jehu came forth to the servants of his Lord, and one said unto him, is all well? Wherefore came this mad fellow to thee? And he said unto him, ye know the man and his communication. And they said, it is false. Tell us now. And he said, thus and thus spake he to me, saying, thus saith the Lord, I have anointed thee king over Israel. And then they hasted and took every man his garment and put it under him on the top of the stairs, and blew with trumpets, saying, Jehu is king. So Jehu the son of Jehoshaphat, the son of Nimshi, conspired against Joram. Now Joram had kept Ramoth Gilead, he and all Israel, because of Hazael king of Syria. But Joram was returned to be healed in Jezreel of the wounds which the Syrians had given him when he fought with Hazael king of Syria. So when it says he kept Ramoth Gilead, that's where he's the king is staying because of the king of Syria. So the king of Syria, had he taken over Samaria? I don't know. It's not clear to me. So anyway, he's staying there for some reason. Maybe it's just because he's having a battle with the king of Syria, or he's protecting from the king of Syria. Not sure. But that's what it means where he kept Ramoth Gilead. That's where the king would stay. Hedge about, that he's protecting it, right? Okay, but the king of Joram was returned to be healed in Jezreel of the wounds which the Syrians had given him when he fought with Hazael king of Syria. And Jehu said, if it be your minds, let none go forth nor escape out of the city to go tell it in Jezreel. So Jehu rode in a chariot and went to Jezreel, for Joram lay there. So Joram's in Jezreel. And Ahaziah king of Judah was come down to see Joram. So we got this as Ahaziah, he's just been made king a little bit ago. And he's come down to see Joram. So he went to visit Joram, who is related to him, right? That would be his uncle, right? And there stood a watchman on the tower of Jezreel, and he spied the company of Jehu as he came and said, I see a company. And Joram said, take an horseman and send to meet them, and let him say, is it peace? So there went one on horseback to meet him, and thus said the king, is it peace? And Jehu said, what hast thou to do with peace? Turn thee behind me. Right? So they keep sending out these messengers, but he's going to call them to join him, right? You know, this is not peace, right? Then he sent a second on horseback, which came to them and said, thus saith the king, is it peace? And Jehu answered, what hast thou to do with peace? Turn thee behind me. And the watchman told, saying, he came even unto them and cometh not again. And driving is like the driving of Jehu, the son of Nimshi, for he driveth furiously. And Joram said, make ready. And his chariot was made ready. And Joram, the king of Israel, and Ahaziah, king of Judah, went out, each in his chariot. and they went out against Jehu and met him in the portion of Naboth the Jezreelite. And it came to pass, when Joram saw Jehu, that he said, Is it peace, Jehu? And he answered, What peace, so long as whoredoms of thy mother Jezebel and her witchcrafts are so many? And Joram turned his hands and fled, and said to Ahaziah, There is treachery, O Ahaziah. And Jehu drew a bow with his full strength and smote Jehoram between his arms, and the arrow went out at his heart, and he sunk down in his chariot. Then said Jehu to Bidkar his captain, Take up and cast him in the portion of the field of Naboth the Jezreelite, for remember that how when I and thou rode together after Ahab his father, the Lord laid this burden upon him. Surely I've seen yesterday the blood of Naboth and the blood of his sons, saith the Lord, and I will requite thee in this plat. I'm not sure what the word plat means. Smoothness. Flattery. Okay, that makes sense. Flattery. Saith the Lord. Now therefore take and cast him that plat into that plat of ground according to the word of the Lord. So this word plat, is it kind of like plot, portion?
Yeah, in my Bible it says portion.
Okay. It's a portion. It's interesting. But the word plat, portion, slippery place, smooth. So it can refer to flattery as well. Okay. But when Ahaziah, the king of Judah, saw this, he fled by the way of the garden house, and Jehu followed after him and said, Smite him also in the chariot. And they did so at the going up to Gur, which is by Ibleam, and he fled to Megiddo and died there. So Jehu is even wanting to get Ahaziah killed because he's of the House of Omri, right? He's a descendant of Jezebel, right? So that's why he has to die as well. Okay, I'm starting to get the picture here. I know I'm slow, but it's starting to make sense. And when Jehu was come to Jezreel, Jezebel heard of it, and she painted her face and tired her head and looked out at a window. Now I know this story is in the Uncle Arthur's Bible story books. And Jehu entered in at the gate, and she said, Had Zimri peace, who slew his master? So she's referring back to this earlier story dealing with Zimri. How long did Zimri reign?
1 week.
Yeah, 7 days. Yeah, okay. And he lifted up his face to the window and said, Who is on my side? Who? And there looked out to him 2 or 3 eunuchs. And he said, Throw her down. So they threw her down, and some of her blood was sprinkled on the wall and on the horses, and he trod her underfoot. And when he was come in, he did eat and drink, and said, Go see now this cursed woman, and bury her, for she is a king's daughter. And they went to bury her, but they found no more of her than the skull, and the feet, and the palms of her hands. Wherefore they came again and told him and said, This is the word of the Lord, which he spake by his servant Elijah the Tishbite, saying, In the portion of Jezreel shall dogs eat the flesh of Jezebel, and the carcass of Jezebel shall be as dung upon the face of the field in the portion of Jezreel, so that they shall not say, This is Jezebel. Right? They don't have her grave. Okay. Yeah, this is now making sense for the first time. What's actually going on. And Ahab had 70 sons in Samaria, and Jehu wrote letters and sent to Samaria, and to the rulers of Jezreel, and to the elders, and to them that brought up Ahab's children, saying, Now as soon as this letter cometh to you, seeing your master's sons are with you, and there are with you chariots and horses, a fenced city also, and armor, look even out the best and meetest of your master's sons, and set him on his father's throne, and fight for your master's house. But they were exceedingly afraid, and said, Behold, 2 kings stood not before him. How then shall we stand? And he that was over the house and he that was over the city. And the elders also, and the bringers up of the children, sent to Jehu, saying, We are thy servants, and will do all that thou shalt bid us. We will not make any king do that which is good in thine eyes. We will not make any king do that which is good in thine eyes. And he wrote a letter the second time to them, saying, If ye be mine, and if ye will hearken unto my voice, take ye the heads of the men, your master's sons, and come to me to Jezreel by tomorrow, this time. Now the king's sons, being 70 persons, significant number there, were with the great men of the city which brought them up. And it came to pass, when the letter came to them, that they took the king's sons and slew 70 persons, and put their heads in baskets, and sent them to Jezreel. And there came a messenger and told him, saying, They have brought the heads of the king's sons. And he said, Lay ye them in 2 heaps at the entering of the gate until the morning. Now, of course, this goes back to who else had 70 sons and they're going to be slain?
Wasn't it Gideon?
Yeah, so Gideon's sons are going to be slain by Abimelech, right? Is that the guy's name?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. But one escapes, which is going to be, what's his name? Can't think of his name.
Jotham.
Oh, yeah, Jotham, right? Okay. Yeah, Jotham, who, there's also a King Jotham, who's the king, the dad of Ahaz. Right. Okay. So Jotham, the week of Christ. Okay. Yeah. So dealing with but this is so interesting. Okay. I just got to go back and understand exactly how this is. So there's these letters. So he's going to slaughter Ahab's descendants. So there's 70 sons of Ahab, right? That's basically, and Ahab had 70 sons in Samaria. Jehu wrote letters and sent to Samaria unto the rulers of Jezreel, to the elders, and to them that brought up Ahab, saying, Now as soon as this letter cometh to you, seeing your master's sons are with you, and there are with you chariots and horses, and a fenced city also in armor, look even out best and meetest your master's sons, and set him on his father's throne, and fight for your master's house. But they were exceedingly afraid, and said, Behold, 2 kings stood not before him. Now then shall we stand? So I guess the idea, so Jehu writes these letters, and he's saying, okay, there are people who are eligible for the throne, right? Because they're descendants of Ahab. They're part of the royal family. So he says, put one of them on the throne, right? This is sort of like a challenge, because he's king over Israel. But these ones are basically in line to be king. One of them is. So the one, the best and meetest, the one that should be king, but they're scared to. They say, well, behold, 2 kings stood not before him, which is, of course, referring to Ahaziah, the king of Judah, and what's his name? Joram, king of Israel, right? That he's going to kill. Okay. So they're scared to do that, though they're going to die anyway. But and he that was over the house and he that was over the city, the elders also, and the bringers up of the children, sent to Jehu, saying, We are thy servants, and will do all that thou shalt bid us. We will not make any king. Do thou which is good in thine eyes. So he wrote a letter the second time to them, saying, If ye be mine, and if ye will hearken unto my voice, take ye the heads of the men of your master's sons, and come to me to Jezreel by tomorrow, this time. Now the king's sons, being 70 persons, were with the great men of the city which brought them up. So the great men of the city is going to deliver these people into the hand of Jehu. It came to pass, when the letter came to them, that they took the king's sons and slew 70 persons, so they're going to kill them, and put their heads in baskets, and sent them to Jezreel. So a nice little, gift basket. And there came a messenger and told him, saying, They have brought the heads of the king's sons. And he said, Lay ye them in 2 heaps at the entering in of the gate until the morning. And it came to pass in the morning that he went out and stood and said to all the people, Ye be righteous. Behold, I conspired against my master and slew him. But who slew all these? Know now that there shall fall unto the earth nothing of the word of the Lord, which the Lord spake concerning the house of Ahab. For the Lord hath done that which he spake by his servant Elijah. So Jehu slew all that remained of the house of Ahab in Jezreel, all his great men, and his kinfolks, and his priests, until he left none remaining. And he arose and departed, and came to Samaria, and as he was at the shearing house in the way. And Jehu met with the brethren of Ahaziah, king of Judah, and said, Who are ye? And they answered, We are the brethren of Ahaziah, and we go down to salute the children of the king and the children of the queen. So this is, Ahaziah, who's he dies, so he's already dead, right? So these are the brethren of Ahaziah, king of Judah. So they're going to be killed as well. That's what he does. Children of the queen. So they're the queen being who's the queen? It's children of the queen. Which queen is this? Okay. Because we know that. So if they're brethren, there would be the descendant from Athaliah, or is this because these are brothers of Ahaziah, and Ahaziah is a descendant of Athaliah, right? I think she must be the queen that's being referred to.
I think that was logical.
Yeah, okay. And he said, Take them alive, and they took them alive and slew them at the pit of the shearing house, even 42 men, so 42 men. Neither left he any of them. So we got the 70 that are killed. Now we have the 42. And when he was departed thence, he lighted on Jehonadab, the son of Rechab, coming to meet him, and he saluted him and said to him, Is thine heart right, as my heart is with thy heart? And Jonadab answered, It is. If it be, give me thine hand. And he gave him his hand, and he took him up to him into the chariot. And he said, Come with me, and see my zeal for the Lord. So they made him ride in his chariot. And when he came to Samaria, he slew all that remained unto Ahab in Samaria, till he had destroyed him, according to the saying of the Lord, which he spake to Elijah. And Jehu gathered all the people together and said unto them, Ahab served Baal a little, but Jehu shall serve him much. So Jehu's going to just worship Baal. Okay. There's still quite a bit more in this chapter here. Right? Quite a bit more to go through. Okay, so I don't get this here. Jehu gathered all the people together and said unto them, Ahab served Baal little, but Jehu shall serve him much. Now therefore call unto me. So this is a deception. Okay. I shouldn't assume, the prophets of Baal, all his servants and all his priests, let none be wanting, for I have a great sacrifice to do to Baal. Whosoever shall be wanting, he shall not live. But Jehu did it subtly, to the intent that he might destroy the worshippers of Baal. So he's not going to worship Baal. He's being deceptive there. And Jehu said, Proclaim a solemn assembly for Baal. And they proclaimed it. And Jehu sent through all Israel, and all the worshippers of Baal came, so that there was not a man left that came not. And they came into the house of Baal, and the house of Baal was full from one end to another. And he said, Bring unto him that was over the vestry, bring forth vestments for all the worshippers of Baal. And he brought forth vestments. And Jehu went, and Jonadab, the son of Rechab, into the house of Baal, and said unto the worshippers of Baal, Search, and look that there be here with you none of the servants of the Lord, but the worshippers of Baal only. And they went in to offer sacrifices and burnt offerings. Jehu appointed 80 men without, and said, If any of the men whom I have brought into your hands escape, he that letteth him go, his life shall be for the life of him. And it came to pass, as soon as he had made an end of offering the burnt offering, that Jehu said to the guard and to the captains, Go in and slay them, let none come forth. And they smote them with the edge of the sword, and the guard and the captains cast them out, and went to the city of the house of Baal. And they brought forth the images out of the house of Baal, and burned them. And they brake down the image of Baal, and brake down the house of Baal, and made it as a draft house unto this day. Sewer. Okay. So I don't know if that word's draught. Maybe it's draught house. I've always been confused by those words. Okay, so anyway, our time's up for today. So this is getting very interesting. You can agree that this is interesting what's happening here. One of these puzzles to unwrap. A lot of symbolism that we have to take into account as well. And any final thoughts before we close?
There's Jonadab, the son of Rechab, mentioned in Jeremiah 35 also, who is very zealous for the Lord, very pious.
Okay. That wouldn't be the same person, though.
Well, it's just interesting, same name.
Yeah, interesting.
Same tribe.
Yeah, a Rechabite. Yeah. Okay, well, let's close with prayer. Dear Father in heaven, thank you for the time that we've had this morning. We just ask again for your Spirit to be with us, that we can think about these things. We ask for a blessing upon each person, that your Holy Spirit can rest upon them, and that your angels can watch over them. And we ask that we can come together again to study these things. It's our prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.